And welcome to the Fierce Urgency of Now in Today's Schools podcast. I am Dr. Cynthia Mama J. Johnson, a voice of hope in education, and I will be your host. Thank you, as always, for joining me for another episode. Before we jump in, let me remind you why we gather. The Fierce Urgency of Now in Today's Schools podcast is dedicated to disrupting, interrupting, and dismantling barriers to changing student outcomes in today's schools. Our students need us now more than ever before, so we've got to come together to figure out what we need to do to take our students to a whole new level. My guest today is one of those individuals that is joining the movement of the fierce urgency of now in today's schools. It is my honor to introduce to you the Superintendent of Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools, Dr. Anna Stubblefield. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing absolutely fabulous. It is so great to see you. I just want to say this officially for the record. I have known you since the beginning of your educational journey. I've seen the work that you've done. I've seen how you've toiled, how you've labored, how you've had some challenges, but you have met them all head on. And here you are today, Superintendent of Schools. So, Dr. Stubblefield, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yep. Well, as Dr. Johnson said, I'm the superintendent of Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools. And honestly, being a superintendent was not on my bingo card or a part of my career in
I love it. I love it.
I started out teaching in Center School District, and that's where I met Dr. Johnson. She was the principal there at the best middle school on the planet at the time. And I was a special education teacher probably in my second or third year when she came to Center. And how I came to education, specifically special education, was honestly very organic. When I went to the University of Kansas, I graduated from the University of Kansas. My undergrad, masters are from there. And I took an intro to education class. I thought originally I was going to be a doctor of some sort, not a doctor of education, but I really loved science. And when I took that class, I fell in love with the experiences, when you go and do your observation.
Right.
So I
Oh my
ended up
gosh.
changing my major to education. So that's how I got into education. But I also was reminded of all of those educators who poured into me from kindergarten on. I was fortunate enough to have amazing educational experience despite
Yes.
the obstacles and barriers that I was experiencing outside of school. So I had teachers who, I don't know if I was their favorite, but I believed kindergarten through sixth grade, I was the teacher's pet. I was the teacher's favorite. I probably wasn't, but I think they just cared about kids and we all felt like we were their favorites. But that's and then so all of those educators who poured into me, I think when I was in those spaces with the other kids, I was reminded of those kindred spirits and decided
Yes.
to major in education. But started as a special education teacher in Center School District in Kansas City, Missouri. Then had the opportunity actually very early on in my career. I probably after 4 years in the classroom, I had been in education probably 5 years, but 4 years in the classroom, I was offered the opportunity to be an assistant principal. And I went from Center School District, which has one high school and one middle school. I don't know how many elementaries, but it was a small district.
Ball.
The Blue Valley School District, which had over 20,000 kids in one of the
Wow.
most affluent districts in this area, probably
Right.
in the country, as an assistant principal. And again, there I had great mentors. Both principals that I worked with were there with. I learned so much. District office staff, same at Center. I was just afforded a lot of experimental opportunities. And I also was surrounded by great educators like Mama J. Like when she was there, I was not at her building, but I would go over to her building. But spent
All the
six
time.
all the time, because it was the best middle school on the planet. Then I went to a middle school as an assistant principal. So those times and those things that I saw you do and how you led your staff really did help me navigate because I was coming from a high school, but spent 6 years in Blue Valley as an assistant principal. In a lot of ways, and through that path, I was the first. Blue Valley is a great district, but didn't have a lot of people who look
Right.
like. But I was coached up, mentored, and supported. So it was a very supportive environment,
Right.
although there weren't a lot of diversity within the administrative staff
Right.
or
Right.
staff. But left Blue Valley after 6 years and went to Lawrence, Kansas, home of the Jayhawks, and became a middle school principal. And there, I was in Lawrence for 13 years.
Yes.
I started out as a principal, then went to be the executive director of HR. From there, I was promoted to assistant superintendent of operations, and the curriculum people kept trying to pull me on to their side. I had no idea that I loved ops so much, and I was like, "Oh, I'm good over here in ops. I'm not, you know." But I learned so much on the operation side. Had a situation where the superintendent stepped down, and I was in a room full of great people. One individual who was a former superintendent, and we're looking around the table and we're like, okay, who's putting their name in the hat for the interim superintendent? And everybody was like, not me. I was like, well, if one of us don't do it, we're going to be doing the job of two people. So I
Right.
was like, putting my name in the hat. And honestly, the team I was with, they were so caring. A story for another day. I had just finished all of my chemo and such because I was
Yeah.
diagnosed with breast cancer in 2015. They were concerned about the stress and all of those things, which
Right.
rightfully so. But I was like, the worst thing can happen is they pick somebody else. But if one
Right.
of us don't try, we don't know what, and we could have gotten somebody wonderful. But I was just thinking about at that time, I had just been promoted to deputy, and I was like, I want to be doing two jobs, even if
Right.
I'm not really doing two jobs. So they selected me, and I had the privilege of serving as interim superintendent for 1 year. And then they hired a great superintendent that following year that
Yes.
I worked with for 4 years, Dr. Anthony Lewis, shout out to him. So I got to work with him. I think we worked together for 4 years. And one of those years, two of those years was like the pandemic time. So
Right.
we really learned a lot.
We
This
all
position
did.
Yes, this position KCK open, and I've been here the last 4 years as the superintendent. And I will tell you, every day I discover something, but I always remember my why. I think about those educators who poured into me,
Right.
advocated for me, and opened doors for me. And that's what I want to do for as many students as possible. And so that's what get me up every morning and out in the streets of KCK and
Right.
or my office or wherever I am to really try to create the best experience for students so they can go on and do whatever they dream of doing.
You know what? Anna, if I can
Yes,
call you
oh,
that,
absolutely.
you know
Yes.
what? I'll tell you what, Dr. Johnson, you know who I really am. I wanted you to take a moment to tell your story because I think sometimes we move so fast, we forget our stories.
Yes. Yes.
And sometimes when you go back and you think, let me go back. I love that you went all the way back to elementary school. I didn't know
Yeah.
you were going to go back that far, but I love that. And then
I
you
love
talked about,
school.
right, right. I'm with you. I hear you. So and you told us the story of it, but the part that kept resonating with me in your words was that you kept saying, pouring in, pouring in, and what that means, really, in essence, is that nobody can pour from an empty pitcher. For somebody to pour into you, you've got to have something within yourself, and that's what I kept hearing when you were talking today. So your story is beautiful. I love the fact that in the midst of a challenge, even though you were going through some things in your personal life, I got to get my tambourine out. Woo, it didn't stop you. It didn't shut you down. You said, here I am, send me. Ooh, that's a whole nother story and a whole nother sermon. We ain't even gonna talk about that. But you kept on. And here you are after all those years, still doing the work. You kept being positioned. I hope you see that. You kept
Yeah.
being positioned all these different roles, whether it was a teacher, whether it was an assistant principal here, assistant principal there, you were assistant superintendent, a deputy superintendent. You kept being positioned. So having said all of that and all that you've shared with us today, and you've told us a little bit, but just take a couple minutes to tell us what brings you to the work and what keeps you doing the work every day.
Well, and I kind of not hinted, I talked about
Just a
what
little bit, yeah.
work, but what brings me to the work and keeps me in the work is when I think about like our future in this world and where we want to go.
Yes,
I think about
yes,
my own children and
yes,
their experiences in three different school systems and the value that I want them to add. I'm like, if I can, and I think about my youngest son, just because like he's a sophomore in college right now, but I think about he had a great support system. He had two educated parents
right,
who how to navigate the system. He had wonderful teachers and educators, and he was able to, and not his school experience was not without challenges, but he
right,
had support systems all around.
right.
And I want every child to have that experience, if not
Yes,
minimally that experience, if
yes,
not a better experience. And it's not about him having both of his parents present, but him just knowing that he could fail forward. Like he
yes,
could try things and say, I'm not going to do it. He could pursue things and he was going to have great cheerleaders. He could fail and he would be encouraged. He could conquer something and it will be celebrated. And I
right.
think, and I can't speak for him, but on the outside looking in, my brother-in-law and I always joke about his son and my son, like they're our youngest children. We were like, if we come back on this earth, we want their life and their childhood
No
just based
kidding.
off of their experiences,
Right, right.
the things that they've seen, the education that they have, the support system that they have. And 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 it's not without any, like it's not that he and I, he's had obstacles like everyone, but
Right.
he is surrounded by love, encouragement, and support in every system he's ever been in. And if something didn't play out right, he had advocates. We knew when to lean in and to lean out.
Yes.
I think every child should have that because he has all the, when he left high school, he had choices. He chose to go to college and play basketball, but he could have went to the military. He could have went
Right.
to the
Right.
workforce. He could
Right.
have just went to college and not played sports.
Right.
It, if there weren't, he didn't graduate and had to think like, I only have this pathway. And
Right.
I think every child should be able to graduate and make choices and be proud of their choices and know that if I change my mind, I have other options. And that's not the reality for
Right.
so many of our kids. And I just want to create equitable systems so that
Right.
every child, regardless of their background, when they leave, they have options and they can
Yes.
exercise those options. Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
That's why you're on here today, because I knew you were going to speak from your heart. You kept talking about this support system. And what I kept hearing in my head is a terminology and phraseology that I use is transforming schools into villages of hope. So he had a village of hope. Now, not that I know your son, but I've watched him. I've watched him play basketball, whether it's in person. I watched him just a few weeks ago at the tournament on TV. So I'm looking at all of these support systems that he has around him. And just imagine what our world would be if we would focus on building those systems around our children and then articulating that up until they become adults. That's what to me resonates in my heart and in my mind when I think about the words from Frederick Douglass, where it says, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. So if we
Absolutely.
put that
Yeah.
support system, if we put that village around our children, then we don't have to worry about the brokenness. Now, they're going to have some struggles. There's going to be some challenges, but those students will always know how to bounce back. They will know that when they fall down, they can get back up again. And they
Absolutely.
know that when there are times when they get off track, they can recalibrate their route and
Right.
get on a whole new road. That's what it's all about. And that's what our children have to have in today's society. So let me
Absolutely.
jump into the second question.
Okay.
From your lens, what is the fierce urgency of now in today's schools?
The From my lens, the fierce urgency of now really is about making sure that school is relevant and
Yes,
engaging and
yes,
not being afraid of trying and doing things differently, because it's so many, like AI has changed the landscape completely. So
yes.
if we don't lean in, which, I'm superintendent of a district and I'm not saying we're there, but if we don't teach students how to be critical problem solvers and to
Yes,
leverage these things and to really learn how to collaborate, work together, and coexist, we are going to run into just more challenges. I listen to a lot of people, and at the heart of challenges with
uh-huh,
adults, not kids, with adults, is we don't know how to engage in civil discourse, problem solve, and
right,
move. So, in all of that, we have to figure out how to make school relevant and engaging, but
right,
also teach people to how to have civil discourse, be kind, and move forward, and agree to disagree, but to really focus on the outcome and not take my ball and go home and say, I'm not talking to that person. I refuse to meet with
right,
this person. I'm like, what? Like, where do you, how do, that's not how adulting works. We don't
right.
get to say, I'm no longer talking to such and such.
Right. I love the fact that you talked about engaging in civil discourse. That is so important because there are going to be so many times when we disagree, but that's okay. I'm not going to fall out because I disagree with what you said or what you've done. We can say, you know what? I still wish you the best, and I'm going to keep on moving forward. And I want you to do the same thing. Before we started recording, I told you I'm not going to tell any names or anything, but I had the opportunity to meet one of your former students, of your 22,000 students. And I was overjoyed when I was at this first gen um, volunteer opportunity and mentoring opportunity and working with students. And one of the things that I love that this student asked that came from your district she said, Mama J, teach us how to make it through hard times. So one of the things we've got to do in our schools today is not just, teach the technical skills. We've got to teach those social emotional skills, but we've got to teach those life skills on how do you bounce back? What is resiliency? Now, I'm a child of poverty, extreme poverty. Now, we didn't know anything about resiliency. In fact, we probably couldn't have even spelled it. That's okay. But I'm grown now and I know it. And that is what resiliency is. And that's really what she was saying to me is how do we bounce back? And even when we have those conversations where we disagree, how do we bounce back and come back together? We still have to go down the same road
Yeah,
and get to the same destination. That's important.
it
Anything you
is.
want to add to that?
No, I think you summed it up beautifully. Like, we know we have to teach them how to read, how to write,
Right,
how to
right.
math, but we have to be just as intentional about teaching
Yes,
them how to collaborate, how to have
yes,
civil discourse, how to get through those hard times, because the older that I get or we get, we know, like, your darkest days you'll see some light, but if
right.
we model and talk about that with students, they may think that there's no way out. So,
There's no way out.
or they may get stuck, and you don't have to get stuck. If you wake up, you have a second chance or a chance to start all over again.
That's
It's a
right. Brand new day, a brand new
Yeah,
opportunity to do it
today's
right.
a new day. I often say to
Yeah,
my son, Like if he had a bad day, the next day I may send him a text. Today is a new day.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
get it. Like you don't have to waddle in whatever happened yesterday. You don't, it's not like it disappeared, but move forward.
Move forward and move on, move on, move on. Every single day, I'm gonna say this on a side note. Every day I post um a different inspirational scripture, if you will. It is entitled "It's a New Day." I posted on LinkedIn, and
Okay.
the reason that I do that, because I want people to know that I know that yesterday may have been hard. I mean,
Absolutely.
yesterday I had so much going on. It was really, really a challenging day. And when I laid my head down on that pillow, it was still with me. You think, oh, I'm gonna let it go. No,
Yep.
it was still with me. And it was still with me as I went throughout the night. But as the daylight came, I had to remember it's a new day.
A new day. Yeah,
Yes. Yes, and
absolutely.
you get up, and like I said, I do it. I always think about I do it to encourage and refresh others, but really, I'm refreshing myself. I was like, "Woo!"
Yeah.
Today's title was "That's Love." I'm not gonna say anything else. That's
I'm gonna
love.
have
That
to go to LinkedIn and I'm gonna do better in the LinkedIn world.
you like
But
I
I'm
go
gonna go
LinkedIn.
look at it just to see it. Yes,
Right,
yes.
right. That's love. I mean, so that's so powerful. So let's jump into the third question because I know if I know nothing about Anna Stubblefield, I know you're gonna jump all over this. So, what are you willing to disrupt, interrupt, or dismantle to ensure all students have access and opportunities to thrive?
I am willing to disrupt, dismantle, interrupt, all the words, the status quo.
Come
Like
on now.
it is not just because we've always done it doesn't mean we have to do it. It doesn't mean because it worked for me,
Right,
it's going to work for the students in front of us. So I
right,
really think there's been years that we've talked about individualized learning, creating
yes,
like, engagement, but that's hard work and that's evolving work
right,
because what individualized learning looks like for me and
uh huh,
the group that may come and maybe come through, it should be very different for the next person. So
right,
it takes time to do that. And I truly, truly recognize that the educators, the teachers, the people that are in the classroom, we have to be cognizant of what we're asking them to do and
right,
really think about how can we balance, like to give them the time and the space and the support to be able to
right,
do that.
yeah,
Because in our traditional model, it doesn't necessarily lend
no,
itself to it. So we have to be willing to give up or invest in both, invest in our students and our educators in order
right,
for them to have the ability to really personalize the learning and disrupt the status quo in a way that we can accomplish what we're trying to accomplish when we say we want school to be personalized, engaging,
right,
and somewhere that our kids want to be. And it may not necessarily be that they're there, from 7:30 to 2:30.
right.
So we have to lean into those spaces. Yeah.
What I love is that you're really shaking up some things because some people don't believe that. Some people believe this is how it's always been done. And we're going to do it that same way. We had a perfect opportunity. We had a pause in our lives 5 years ago that gave us an opportunity to reimagine. Let's reset this. Let's not go back and do the same old things. But if you go around and you look at schools in our nation, I'm just going to give a guess that 80, 90% of the schools went right back to doing the same old things. The schedules look the same old ways. Schools start the same time. We've got to get our children out of this environment and this thought process that this is the only way to do it.
Yeah.
In order for us to be able to prepare students adequately for the future, I always use the terminology to ensure that they are fully equipped. We've
Mhm.
got to do something differently.
Yeah, and I will
Yeah,
say, just because somebody, if you're watching this and you're like, well, it is true, but it is hard work, but it doesn't mean that we don't ask the questions It
Right.
doesn't mean that we don't create the conditions. And are we moving like at the pace, like would I want to wave a magic wand and all be done?
Right.
Absolutely. But I am always willing when someone brings an idea or wants to try something, I'm like, we're going to try to figure this out. And
Right.
one of the things that I'm very proud of since I've been here, when I got here, there is what we call Diploma Plus. It means that
Yes.
graduating with a diploma plus something else. And the something else can be you have college credits, you have an entrepreneurial experience, you have a client connected project, and it's a long list of things
Right.
that you can put on your resume. So when I came to the district, about 48, close to 50% of our students were graduating with a diploma plus. And we were doing some not really strategic plan refresh, like,
Right.
and a colleague was like, "What's your North Star?" And as I thought about it, and I was like, "Well, in 10 years, I would want to say 100% of our
Right.
students
Right.
graduate with Diploma Plus." So our North Star is by 2031, 100% of our students would graduate with a Diploma Plus with no disparities in race or gender or
Right.
any area, while meeting or exceeding the state graduation rate, because our graduation rate was not the greatest. Um, and so we have targets each year. And our class of 24, our target was 65%, but we had 77% of our students to graduate with a diploma plus. So we are ahead of our goal. But what excites me about is that those experiences that we're providing for
Right.
students, like the traditional diploma plus, like the college and stuff, but we have created and provided so many client connected projects, so many
That's so
internships.
good.
So our students are getting a lot of different experiences. We have different pathways at Sligo High School and Harmon High School. We've partnered with Junior Achievement to do the 3DE program. And
Yes.
I was just over there watching some students being coached by business people, and they were solving for how to improve the gate experience for Delta. Delta Airlines is a partner, and they're putting together their pitches and somebody will win. But it's changing what their school
Right.
experience is, because that wasn't a club, it wasn't a special
Right.
class. It was a part of their, I believe, their ELA or science class. Like it was just a part of the
Right.
curriculum. My
Right.
goal
Right. Oh,
is
that is
to make those experiences a part of the curriculum, so you don't have to choose to go to, you can choose to go to a VOTEC or CTE or go to a
right.
college. But if you just say, I just
That's so
want to go
good.
to school, we're going to make sure that you have those experiences in your classrooms. And the kids loved it, were very
Yes.
engaged, and it was just exciting to see that happen for those students.
I love it. And another tambourine shake. I'm telling you right now, just what you have said is so absolutely exciting. I knew that by 2031, your North Star was going to be 100%. I went on the website and I saw that, and that is so exciting to see that. First of all, to hear that you're ahead of that work, and that one, you're not just maintaining the momentum, you are pushing the momentum forward. And that's what it's going to take for you to be able to get to where you need to be in just a few years. That is what it's going to take. And I love that business people and from the community are coming in and sitting down and engaging in conversations, not just conversations, but activities. Now, if the students from Kansas City, Kansas public schools um, solve the Delta issue, we're going to have a special banner out at the airport, because I'm telling you that there are so many things that are going on in our airport system that needs to be solved. But you know what is so interesting? We as adults, we sit down and we're just so literal about it. Take it to a child
Mm-hmm.
and watch a child say, well, I would recommend this. Well, have you ever thought about that? And you're like, you know, that's really good. That's really good. That really, really makes sense. So I get it and understand it. So I've got one last question that I want to throw at you, because you've just said so
Okay.
many wonderful things. If you could give our audience today a call to action for our fierce urgency of now in today's schools, what would your call to action be for our audience?
It would be for educators and non-educators. One of the biggest things that really influenced me were mentors, not necessarily
Okay.
former mentors,
Right.
not people. Mentoring matters and relationship matters. And if you can volunteer or just pour into someone else, my call to action would be a mentor in some capacity, because mentoring matters. And if
Yes.
kids know that someone believes in them, someone is there for them, be a part of building that village of support. Is that what you called it? Village
Yes.
of hope.
Village of Hope. Village of Hope.
Become a member of somebody's village to get
Right.
hope. That will be my call to action, because then you can be boots on the ground, and whatever that needs to look like for that individual student, it will just help them get there. And just being a part of it is so rewarding, because when
Yes.
they win, you win, and we all win. So that would
I
be
love
my
it.
question.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love that. I love that. Pouring in, like I said, those words just keep coming back to me and in my mind. And let me say this, Anna. You know, I laughed when you said, "I've known you since the best middle school on the planet." You're exactly right. That takes me back all the way back to 1999, because that's the first time I ever said those words. And if somebody would say, "Now, did you plan to say those words?" No,
Right.
they were on my heart and they came out of my mouth, and we rolled with it. Center Middle School, the best middle school on the planet. We rolled with it. I loved it. And I have to joke about this. Every time I was serving some food, you would show up and I would say, "Now, who is this young lady?" Because you know I'm just a country girl. And I love to serve food. I love to cook. I love to take care of people. That's what we got to do in the country and things. So let me say this in our time in closing today. I so appreciate you, first of all, accepting my invitation. I know you're busy. I know this is a day we're closing out. We're almost finished up today. I'm excited about being able to post this for people so they can hear it and get energy and just ideas for what they can do to carry on, because sometimes it just takes one word. Sometimes it just takes one person to say something. So let me say this in closing. In our world of education today, there's so much going on. It's like you turn the TV on every single day. There's something being closed down. Somebody has done this, done that. But you know what? We can't focus on those issues. Those are adult issues. What we have to focus on are our students. So I say this in closing today. The fierce urgency of now in today's school, that inspiration came from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Those are his words. And I added the in today's schools. But Dr. Martin Luther King talked about the fierce urgency of now in his I Have a Dream speech, when he talked about um, where we are as it relates to, working together, where it relates to discrimination and racism. We have to have that same urgency today in our schools. So regardless of what things look like, regardless of what gets closed down, what anyone has said, what anyone has signed, that doesn't make me a difference. That doesn't move me. What moves me is that I have done the very best for every child that I come in contact with. So regardless of how dark it gets, these are the words I have to say. You know I am Dr. Cynthia Mama J. Johnson. So you already know I got a song somewhere. I'm going to say, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Thank you, Dr. Anna Stubblefield, for
Thank
joining
you.
me today.
Thank you for the opportunity.